A few thoughts on planning and planting an orchard. First, I'd like to ask you to consider yourself an orchardist. Whether it's 1, 10, 100, or even 1,000 trees, the principles are essentially the same. Two, I think you need to take a step back and look at the overall picture. The tendency is to grab a spade, grab a tree, dig a hole, plant the tree. In reality, the last thing you do is plant the darn tree. So I say planning and planting an orchard. In regards planning, again, another little step back, and a quote from a man whose thinking I admire, Wendell Berry, Kentuckian, farmer, draft horse farmer I might add, philosopher, writer, and educator. What will nature allow us to do here? What can nature help us to do here? So you need to get an overall assessment of your orchard site. And of course, sunlight is paramount. It takes a minimum of 6 to 8 hours a day of direct sunlight during the growing season to grow the tree and fruit the tree. 8 to 10 would be better. More on sunlight and its effect in a minute here. But another thing you definitely want to look at is the lay of the land, the topography. And you have two basic choices. You've got flat ground and you've got sloping ground. And you can refer to this chart here as I've entitled it, The Lay of the Land. Let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of flat ground versus sloping ground. Flat ground, well, it's flat. It's easier to amble about, drive a tractor, work on, etc. Slopes are more difficult. And when I say slope, I mean an amiable, gentle slope, not a steep, precipitous one. But flat ground is easier to work. Flat ground, particularly if it's bottomland, the bottom of a slope, will have an accumulation of soil that accumulates over geological time. It'll have deep, rich soil. This is good. Slopes, soil can be a little to a lot skinnier. Bottomland, flat, easy to work, deep soil. Issues might be frost and drainage. Cold air moves downward on a slope, settles in the bottom ground, could be a frost pocket. And you need to check your soil. It could be good, deep, and rich, but does it drain well? Fruit trees have a real high need for a well-drained soil. So you can do a simple perk test. Simply dig a hole a foot by a foot, fill it with water, rinse, repeat. Let it drain. It should drain within 2 or 3 hours of being filled, certainly overnight. So flat ground is good. Let's talk a little bit more about a gentle south-facing slope in the northern hemisphere and the opposite, north-facing south in the southern hemisphere. So an amiable slope, a south-facing slope, will give you a considerable microclimatic boost. Again, cold air is heavy and drains down slopes, so slopes tend to be more frost-free. This is critical, particularly during bloom period in the spring. Slopes, south-facing slopes again, tend to be overall warmer. That is, the air and the soil temperatures are warmer. And this is again critical at different junctures throughout the year. Two critical ones being during bloom time. You need it to be warm, sunny, wind-free, ideally, so that the pollen in the flowers on the fruit trees flows or is viable, and the pollinators, usually bees, native and non, can fly, get pollen, pollinate and fertilize the trees and help you to get a good fruit set. So slopes are better and more frost-free, a little warmer in the spring, and the other time where you want that microclimatic heat boost from a south slope is mid-course to maturation in the summer to really finish the fruit off and bring the sugar levels up. Heat equals sugar. So a nice gentle south-facing slope has many microclimatic advantages. It's warmer, flat out. Let's look at this top chart here. Some of the rationale behind that is as the sun hits the ground on a south-facing slope, its rays are more, and its heat energy is more concentrated. That is, it is, as it were, deposited over a narrower area, giving greater heat to both the air and the soil. On flat ground, the way that the sun strikes the ground is more dispersed, spread out over a bigger area, and there's a little less heat energy delivered. And north-facing slopes are the other end of the spectrum, and I would suggest that you really don't want to consider a north-facing slope for growing fruit trees. They are problematic in so many ways, particularly in terms of frost. So, do you have a choice? If you do, here are some things to think about. Often with the small grower, the home grower, the yard grower, the backdoor grower, it's more like the site chooses you than you choose the site. This is the plot of ground I have. Some of the things you want to think about, yeah, you want to look at the soil, do a soil dig, a soil profile, make sure you've got at least 2 feet of a good rich soil. Again, a perk test, make sure it's well drained, but you want to make sure you walk around and track the sun daily, monthly, seasonally, and make sure your trees are positioned out away from shrubbery, trees, and the building so they get good sunlight.